Trustees of Lufkin Independent School District is called to order at 5:15 p.m. Notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, and a quorum of the board is present. First of all, we're going to start. The second item is the invocation. First of all, the second item. Joe, time.
Let us pray. Our Father and our God in heaven, we come to you in prayer, just thanking you for everything that you do for us, things that we often overlook. We thank you for this opportunity that we have to serve this city, these kids, this faculty and staff, and we just pray, Father, that we always do the best that we can, considering everyone else rather than ourselves. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the blood that he shed on the cross. In his name we pray. Amen.
Our pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. I'd like to welcome everybody. We've got a smaller crowd tonight, shorter agenda, but glad that all of you are here. We did not have anyone registered to speak to the board today from the general public, and so we'll move past item number 5, straight to item number 6. We're going to call on Jill Gaston to give us our school quality survey presentation.
Sure. Okay, I will say, the geeky side of me is super excited to present this. You know, we started this year with going through a lot of data related to schools, our programs, what we have to offer, and how we're doing in each one of those areas. And going through our SGS process this year has really opened our horizons in how we're looking at data and what data are we looking at. And so this winter, kind of winter into spring, we went through a process where we polled everyone in our school community, from students, parents, staff, everyone in the school community, to really assess the quality of our schools and the services and experiences that we're providing. We have a lot of good news in this survey. We obviously found some areas to work on, but that's part of the good too, right? So we're not making guesses anymore. We're really using the data to help drive what are our people, our community experiencing, and how are we going to turn that into something better and something great. So that's kind of what this reflects. Each one of the campus principals got a copy of their campus-specific data, so they can take that data and translate it into their planning process through the summer to address some of these things. Okay. So the window was open for everyone to respond from mid-February to the beginning of March. The principals did an amazing job in pushing that out to parents, reminding staff, getting it to the kids in a usable way that they could answer the questions. We did not poll K2 because there wasn't a good way to adapt those questions. 3-5 had the same substance in their questions, but it was kind of brought down to an age-appropriate reading level, so their questions were a little bit different. So what you're going to see in this data is a combined question and response percentage because all the groups had very similar questions in terms of students, but some were adapted to be age-appropriate. So we had almost 5,000 people respond, which for a district this size is absolutely incredible. Now that does combine all the different, populations, but this was incredible stakeholder engagement. And to have the results that we have, like I say, there will be places that we see that we need to make improvements, but that's the beauty in this, is now we're not guessing, what people are experiencing. We have it so that we can address those things specifically. The light purple bar represents the individuals who filled out the Spanish version of the survey. So if we gained anything from this, it's that we need to make a concerted effort next year going into this, that we're really communicating with those Hispanic parents or those Spanish speakers so that they know that this is something they need to respond to for feedback. So these are the different groups. Just the overall quality of our school. This was a very specific question, and you had 4 answer choices. And you can see, and I'll give you just kind of a minute to digest that, but you can see if you combine the excellent and the good bars, we are really doing some great things. For a district our size that has gone through the amount of change that we've gone through in the last couple of years, for people to overwhelmingly feel like their experiences are good and that the quality is good or excellent, there's some really good news in these bar graphs. Okay, so this is for our students, parents, and staff at the different grade level bands. You can see that there's not a yellow bar at the primary, and that's because we did not poll the primary students in terms of their experiences and their overall school quality. For the secondary side, and you will see that through this presentation, the secondary students and students in general is where we need to focus in terms of their experience and the quality of that experience. Whether that's a perceived experience, because sometimes they make assumptions about rules or the application of rules, whatever that is, whether that's perceived or a reality, that is an area that we need to focus in terms of our planning as administrators, whether that's campus administration, district administration. That's an area for us to focus on because we want to make sure that our students, all the planning that we're doing, they're receiving the experience that we hope and intend that they experience. Okay, so the next slide is specific to academic support. The bar colors represent the same thing. You can see that there are parts and pieces of this that have asterisks beside it. Those are the questions that were combined and changed at that 3rd through 5th grade level to be more age appropriate. So the general essence of the question, this school has high learning standards for all students. It might have looked a little different at that 3-5 band than exactly those words. But you can see that with our parents and our staff, and again, this is a common thread through this whole survey presentation, our parents and our staff are overwhelmingly pleased with their experience with Lufkin ISD. Our students have a little bit different perception. And our campuses have their student-specific data to really dive into to try to help that student experience or that perceived experience. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, student support. Again, our staff and parents are overwhelmingly pleased with their experience. Our students have a little bit different response in some of these. And again, like the students at this school are treated fairly. Is that a perception because they don't understand the student code of conduct, or is that a reality? And so our administration are digging into some of those to make sure that our students understand and that if there are things that, may not feel fair or truly aren't fair, that we're addressing those.
What occurs to me is like if you ask these same kids, do you feel like they're being treated fairly at home? How many of them would say yes and how many would say no?
Right, so that's why it's important to try to...
Is to understand what's behind it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that would be interesting to get a report back later about the student experience.
Sure.
Is to see what do we learn as a district through going through the effort at the campus level. I would be really interested in hearing some feedback later
Okay,
about that.
we can work on that.
And fair is so subjective. I
Yeah.
don't like that word.
It is.
Yeah, because, like for students, only 66% of the students said that they have access to safe and timely bus transportation. That makes me wonder because every now and then you'll hear people that they, because of the rules that we have to follow on providing the transportation, that you have people that live within the boundary of the school that don't qualify, and maybe they
Right.
believe the boundary is unfair. And I could see that, but I'm wondering, is there something else that their perception of that being access, that maybe that has something to do with it? That's a puzzling one.
But there is a common denominator or thread. Because if you look at that question, and you look at some of the others, and if there is a misunderstanding,
Right.
then you start to say, all right, how are we communicating?
Yeah.
So you could say, we need to improve our communication efforts to help people better understand what is available, if it's not available, why it's not available, and really drill down to the type of communication that resonates with their current reality or environment or.
And again, these are very subjective. Overwhelmingly with our staff and parents, they are overwhelmingly pleased with school leadership. Some of these, just as a school leader and being transparent and vulnerable, it's really hard to ask some of these questions. But when you get these responses, it really does make you feel good about our leadership, what they're doing, and their accessibility to our families. However, as a child, you do see that through a different lens. You see that authority and that leadership and how it applies to them. And I think Ms. Gay is onto something. If you ask these same questions about their parents, what would those responses be? But it is important for us as a district to know that we do have kids that feel this way, and we do need to figure out where that feeling is coming from.
Jill, since we have secondary administrators, principals in the room, because there's a huge percentage of your kids who responded. 2297 out of how many, 3,000 kids between your two schools? How did you get that enormous response? Because that's way more than the parents in the district. That's way more than, so. Was it like every class? You have to fill this out?
At high school, we went through our year-long classes, because they'll change out of classes. So in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade,
Yeah.
they've got a unique class that is year-long. And so we went through that class period for them, or that subject. And then for seniors, it's a little more hit and miss, because if they were in English or government economics, they're required courses. So seniors are probably not as represented, but 9, 10, and 11 would be.
Same thing for us, we just incorporate it to our classroom for them to do that survey.
It's a much larger sample size of that audience than it is any of the other ones. I think, if I'm reading the first graph correctly.
I think it's interesting, Jill, that on the slide before this, when it asked the question about could I go to somebody like a teacher or counselor, with the concern the percent of students was really high.
Really high.
80s. And so that's a positive, that they do feel like they can go to a teacher and counselor.
Yeah.
So just interesting.
This is just the second slide, but you have a copy of. Some of these prompts are kind of lengthy, but to have such a large sample size and still be, above 80% and the majority of these answers outside of the bottom one. I don't know, I think it speaks volumes to people's experiences. This next one is interesting to me. Again, the student side was very low, and it directly contradicts some of the parent response, and it's very interesting. The school encourages families to volunteer, and parents were at 80%. They were like, yes, they're asking me to volunteer, and kids were at 47%. So again, I think it does come back to some of this is communication-based and making sure that the school as a system and all the stakeholders that are there understand those opportunities.
I'd love to see the breakdown by campuses, because like if you had a large sample size of parents from a campus that felt like there was a lot of good communication, and then maybe the other sample sizes were from another, I just like to see that comparator.
Well, the principals did, get their data that was specific to their world, so they at least have that information to plan from. But I could see, we do have campuses that have higher concentrations of very involved parents, so how that may influence the data. Okay, safety and behavior. This one was interesting, and Dr. Spikes and I've had several conversations about how do we increase some of these, this school is safe. From the kids' perspective, they're feeling something. They're seeing something, feeling something, experiencing something, and we need to dig into that because we need to know, is that a reality or is that just a perception? So I know that our campus principals are working on that. The safety and security team is working on that to really figure out what's driving what seems like a lower number than what we would hope it to be.
But this was before the...
Yes, this would have been before the full implementation of weapons detection systems. So how do we use this data? This slide is a little wordy, although it is all accurate. But just like Monday, we had our DLT, and the principals had their results for a couple of weeks. And so as principals and other district leadership, they worked on putting together the envisioned student experience. So based on what we know, now that we have this data, how do we create a vision for their experience and then work backwards and make sure that that's fed into all of our campuses and classrooms? What is the portrait of our graduate going to look like? And then how do we backwards design that down to the students now that we know what students are feeling and seeing and perceiving throughout our system? And so we're truly using this data alongside the numerical data that we get with student achievement and the growth piece to really drive the processes, the systems, and the programs that we're putting in from the beginning of our system to the end of our system, so that this is not going to fix it all overnight or by next year, but through this SGS process and becoming a great school, by the end of that we should see some real changes. So this is some really strong baseline data to help kind of drive us towards those other things that we're trying to accomplish. Does anybody have questions?
This is fascinating.
It
It's
is.
something that we've never seen before. And I think Allison said it well, to get this big a participation, I think gives us some confidence in using this information. That we're not just getting highly engaged Emily and no one else. I feel like our sample size was much bigger than what we would have thought it could be. I think this is a really good start, really. And thank you for the extra work I know you put into having this ready today.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, my geeky side has really enjoyed it. But y'all let me know if you have any questions now or, in the
And
future.
this will be
But,
annual?
Yes, it will be annual. So in the, kind of in that system of great school sequence of events through the year, that calendar, this will happen every winter to spring. So between January and March, you'll do this again, and that way you can track the data from one year to the next.
And thank you principals for forcing them to take it.
Yeah.
Okay, so item number 7 is closed session. The board will now convene into a closed meeting at 5:36 PM in accordance with the Texas Open. Looked at me and I thought I'm doing it wrong.
Paying attention to you.
In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551, subchapters D and E, or Texas Government Code 418.183F, no action will be taken during the closed meeting.
I'm sure you can make that happen.
I don't know. Yeah, that might be.
Love sleep.
No, you didn't.
Maybe I might get to Rotary.
Yeah.
Already gave you the heads up. Oh, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
That's if we have any contract, we don't have any. I remember, we don't.
It is now 6:14 PM and the board will reconvene in open session. We do not have, anything to discuss on item number 9, so we're gonna move straight to item number 10. Discussion and possible board action on superintendent recommendations related to terminations and or proposed non-renewals of probationary and or term contract employees. Dr. Huckleberry.
Do you have a recommendation, from me, superintendent of schools, termination, for non-renewal of term contracts?
Okay. I move to propose the non-renewal of the 2025-2026 term contract of Angela Bennett pursuant to and for reasons set forth in policy DFBB local, and to authorize the superintendent to provide notice to Ms. Bennett of this action on behalf of the board.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation from the superintendent related to the termination and non-renewal of a term contract employee. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed to that? That motion carries. With that, that's our final item of business for tonight. There be no other things. We are now adjourned at 6:15 PM.